Yes, it was. I had a heart surgery thing, like it was Tony Orlando.
He made the world laugh, loud, uncontrollably, from the gut. But behind the contagious joy of Robin Williams was a boy who spent most of his childhood in silence. A silence not of peace, but of absence. Absence of touch. Absence of warmth. Absence of a mother who was there, but not really there. Absence of a father whose presence felt like a formal report being filed. Long before the Oscar, before the laughter, before the fame, there was just a little boy talking to himself in the basement, doing voices, inventing characters, performing to an empty room. Not for fun, for survival. This is not the story of a celebrity. It is the story of a child who became a clown to protect himself. A genius who mastered voices because he never found one who spoke to his soul. A son who never truly knew if he was loved. And today, we go back. Not to the spotlight, but to the shadows. To the beginning. To where the pain began. What really happened to Robin Williams' parents? And how did it shape the man the world thought they knew?
Robin McLaurin Williams was born on July 21, 1951 in Chicago, Illinois, a city of steel and storms, fitting for a soul both sharp and turbulent. He was the only child of Robert Fitzgerald Williams, a senior executive at Ford Motor Company, and Lori McLaurin Smith, a former fashion model with Southern aristocratic roots. From the outside, his life seemed paved with comfort. A wealthy home, private schools, polished appearances. But Robin's world was never about what was seen. It was always about what was missing. When he was young, the Williams family moved often, from the Midwest to the affluent neighborhoods of Marin County, California. Robin spent hours alone in the family's large house, with only toys and voices in his head to keep him company. The echoes in those empty rooms weren't filled with laughter, but with characters, voices, imaginary friends. It was there, in the echo chambers of isolation, that his brilliance began to take shape. He found refuge in performance, enrolling in theater and eventually landing at the prestigious Juilliard School in New York. There he studied under the great John Houseman, alongside future legends like Christopher Reeve. But even among talent, Robin stood out. His mind raced faster than most could follow. He could leap from Shakespeare to slapstick in the blink of an eye. Teachers were amazed. Classmates were in awe. No one could deny he was one of a kind. His breakthrough came with Mork and Mindy, where he turned a simple alien into a phenomenon. From there, the world became his stage. Dead Poets Society, Good Morning Vietnam, Aladdin, Mrs. Doubtfire, Patch Adams, Good Will Hunting. In each role, he wasn't just acting, he was revealing fragments of his own soul. The mentor, the misfit, the magician, the man-child, the father searching for connection. Audiences adored him, critics praised him, but those closest to Robin knew, beneath the brilliance, he wrestled with storms, addiction, anxiety, a sadness that lingered even in triumph. He once said, "I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make people happy." And perhaps that's why his performances were so unforgettable, because they weren't performances, they were confessions. Robin Williams wasn't just a comic genius, he was a mirror to humanity's deepest contradictions, joy and sorrow, presence and absence, fame and loneliness. And to truly understand him, we must go back further, before the stage, before the fame, to a boy, and the two people who shaped everything by being present and by being painfully absent.
Robin's father, Robert Fitzgerald Williams, was the kind of man who walked into a room and made the air feel colder. Tall, stern, always dressed immaculately in his corporate suits, Robert was a senior executive at the Lincoln Mercury division of Ford Motor Company. He spent his days in boardrooms and his evenings in silence. To many, he was the picture of success, disciplined, articulate, composed. But to young Robin, he was a mystery behind a closed office door. Robin would later say, half joking, "You didn't talk to Dad, you made an appointment." Their conversations were brief, efficient, never emotional. The love was there, perhaps, buried somewhere beneath the layers of 1950s masculinity and corporate detachment. But for a child craving connection, craving silliness and softness, it felt like trying to hug a statue. The kind of statue that looked just past you. Still, there were moments, rare golden glimpses. Robert had a dry wit, and on occasion, when Robin dared to make a silly face or impersonate someone at dinner, a small smile would flicker at the corner of his father's mouth. That half-second of approval became a treasure. Robin learned quickly, comedy wasn't just an escape, it was a way in, a code to crack the armor of a distant father. Then there was Lori McLaurin Williams, Robin's mother. A Southern woman with New Orleans charm and an aristocratic pedigree, Lori was everything her husband was not. Expressive, stylish, magnetic. She had once worked as a fashion model and came from a lineage that included a U.S. senator and governor. But status didn't translate into intimacy. Lori was witty, even theatrical, and many believed Robin inherited his comedic flair from her. But their bond was complicated. She loved to entertain, but didn't always know how to connect. Friends described her as present, but not involved. Robin, as a child, would try to imitate her voice, trying to get her to laugh. It worked, but what he wanted wasn't laughter. It was attention. He often described childhood dinners as auditions. He performed, he observed, he calibrated every gesture. He became the little actor long before Juilliard, because when his mother laughed, it felt like sunlight finally touched his skin. And when she didn't notice, he vanished again into the shadows of that big, beautiful house. Their home in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan was elegant, full of silence and ceilings too high. Robin's playroom was the basement, cold, concrete, dim, but that's where his world bloomed. He built entire universes down there. Voices, characters, accents, stories, alone but alive. While upstairs, the world moved on without him. He wasn't abused, he wasn't neglected in the traditional sense, but emotional absence can be its own form of heartbreak. Robin was the child of parents who were both impressive and unavailable. He was given every material comfort, but starved for emotional nourishment. Years later, he would say in interviews that his childhood was good, but that good always sounded like a performance, because beneath that answer was a boy still trying to make someone laugh, hoping they'd finally turn and say, "I see you." And though he would grow to be beloved by millions, adored on stages around the world, there was always a part of Robin that remained that little boy in the basement, whispering voices to the dark. It's no wonder that when the time came, he would play fathers, teachers, caretakers, roles he never truly had, but deeply understood. But time waits for no one, and for Robin, the moments he longed for most with his parents, the quiet talk, the warm hug, the shared joke, would never come. Because before healing could begin, death arrived first.
The first loss came quietly. In 1987, Robin Williams was already a rising star, fresh from the breakout success of Good Morning Vietnam, with his name echoing in Hollywood studios. But far from the spotlight, in a modest home tucked away from cameras, his father, Robert Fitzgerald Williams, was slipping away. Robert had been dealing with health issues for some time, though Robin rarely spoke of them publicly. Perhaps because illness wasn't something his father would have allowed to define him. The details are sparse. Robert passed from complications related to heart disease. But what remains more vivid is the absence Robin felt when he received the news. There was no tearful goodbye, no final confession, no grand reconciliation. Just a phone call. Just silence. Friends recalled that Robin didn't grieve outwardly. He didn't break down. He went to work. He made people laugh,
On set, he joked as always, but behind the camera, he stared off a little longer than usual. He once told a friend, "I don't think I ever really knew my father, and now I never will." That finality, that door closing without ever being opened, haunted him. 14 years later, the second loss cut deeper. In September 2001, just 1 week before the world would be shaken by 9/11, Robin's mother, Lori McLaurin Williams, passed away. The timing was cruel. The world was about to fall apart, and so was his own. Her death came after a period of illness kept private from the media. She had faded slowly. Another light dimmed in his already haunted sky. Unlike with his father, Robin had made more of an effort to connect with his mother in later years. There were visits, shared laughs, old stories retold. But even then, the bond never quite reached the place he longed for. Laurie's wit remained sharp, but the emotional distance never truly closed. In her final days, Robin sat quietly by her bedside, speaking in soft tones. No characters, no jokes. Just a son trying to find the mother he had always performed for. When she passed, there were no public statements, no tributes. Robin returned to work quickly, just as he had with his father. But those close to him say something in him dimmed. The energy that once burst like wildfire now flickered. He was still brilliant, but more fragile, as if the final thread connecting him to his beginnings had snapped. He later described grief as wearing lead shoes in a river. It slows you down, even when the world expects you to swim. Robin lost both his parents, not in dramatic headlines, but in quiet moments. No tabloid scandal, no grand eulogies, just quiet departures that left enormous voids. And perhaps that's why his later characters felt so deeply human, because he knew, more than anyone, what it was like to laugh with a broken heart. But grief doesn't vanish, it transforms, and for Robin, it would evolve into something even darker in the years ahead.
The funeral for Robert Fitzgerald Williams was held on a cloudy April afternoon in 1987. It wasn't lavish, despite his corporate stature, just a modest gathering in a small Michigan chapel, with a quiet hum of organ music in the background, and the smell of aged wood and wilting lilies hanging in the air. Robin arrived late. Not because he meant to, he had flown overnight, straight from a studio set, but somehow it felt fitting. His father's life had always been one step removed from his own, and now, even in death, there was distance. Robin sat in the back pew, head bowed, fingers clasped so tightly they turned white. He didn't speak, he didn't cry, and when invited to say a few words, he declined. Instead, he rose, walked to the casket, and placed a small sealed envelope on top. No one knew what it said. Later, a close friend would recall him whispering, "He was a quiet man. I'll let silence be his goodbye." There was no media, no spectacle. His father's legacy, much like the man himself, slipped away with restraint. But for Robin, it was a funeral without closure, a goodbye to a relationship that never quite began. 14 years later, the scene was even more intimate. Lori McLaurin Williams' funeral took place in San Francisco inside a historic Episcopalian church with stained-glass windows casting pale colors across polished wooden pews. It was early September 2001. The city was still humming with late summer life, unaware of the global chaos just days ahead. Robin walked in alone. This time he wore no black. Instead, he dressed in muted blue, a soft homage, some said, to a dress his mother once wore when he was a child. As he approached the casket, he paused for a long moment. There were tears this time, not loud or dramatic, but steady, a quiet tremble in the jaw, a voice that didn't speak. And in his hand was a faded photograph, Lori, young and laughing, holding him as a baby. He knelt beside the casket, pressed the photo gently onto the polished wood, and whispered something no one could hear. No cameras were allowed. The press never knew the exact details, but one witness, a family friend, later said It was the only time I ever saw Robin completely still. The service ended with a simple prayer and the toll of a single bell. No fanfare, no stage, just finality. Robin didn't linger. He stepped outside, lit a cigarette, and stared at the sky for nearly half an hour, not moving, not performing, just existing. He would later tell a colleague, "I always thought I'd feel something more, but it's just silence." And in that silence, perhaps, was the deepest farewell of all. Because when the laughter is gone and the lights go dark, what's left is the echo. The hollow space where a mother's voice should be, the seat where a father never sat, the unspoken words, the missed touches, the final glances that never happened. Robin had said goodbye the only way he knew how, with tenderness, with memory, and with a wound that would never quite close. After the funerals, Robin didn't take time off. He returned to work almost immediately, throwing himself into roles that, ironically, echoed the relationships he had just buried. In Mrs. Doubtfire, he played a father desperate to be present. In Good Will Hunting, a therapist haunted by the death of his wife. In 1 Hour Photo, a man obsessed with the idea of family perfection. Each performance, though cloaked in fiction, carried something very real, a man grappling with ghosts he never learned how to name. Privately, Robin spoke little about his parents' deaths, not out of avoidance, but because he didn't know how to explain the ache of absence. He once said in a rare interview, "Grief doesn't shout, it whispers through everything," and that whisper became the quiet undercurrent of his final decade. Those close to him noticed a change. His humor remained, but his eyes often betrayed it. There was a heaviness, a slowness between the punchlines. On set, he sometimes lingered alone after a scene wrapped, watching the floor, as if listening for footsteps that would never come. He began spending more time alone. His philanthropic work increased. He supported children's hospitals, veterans' causes, addiction recovery centers, not for publicity, but because, perhaps, giving filled something that applause never could. Friends said he seemed to find comfort in helping others heal, even when he couldn't always heal himself. The loss of both parents left Robin unmoored in ways he couldn't articulate. He had built a career on transformation, becoming anything, anyone, but he couldn't become the boy who got a second chance to say, "I love you." In many ways, his characters became tributes. Each father he played, each mentor, each oddball angel or grieving soul was a part of Robin that was trying to reach back, to be seen, to be embraced, to make peace with what never was. Years later, he told a friend, "You live long enough and your family becomes memories. But if you perform them just right, maybe they come alive again, just for a moment." And perhaps that's what he was always doing. Not escaping the past, but resurrecting it, one character at a time.
They say laughter is the best medicine, but for Robin Williams, it was also a shield, a way to survive the silences, the spaces left by two parents who were physically present but emotionally distant. He gave the world his joy, his genius, his heart. But behind the curtain, he remained that little boy in the basement, hoping someone would notice, hoping someone would stay. Robin's story isn't just about fame or tragedy. It's about the invisible wounds that shape us, the echoes of childhood that never quite fade. He made millions feel seen, heard, loved. But perhaps, deep down, he was still waiting to feel that himself. So maybe the real question is this: how many of us wear laughter like armor, hiding the pain of what we never received? And if Robin, the brightest soul in the room, could feel alone, then who around us might feel the same? If this story touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because sometimes the act of remembering is the kindest tribute we can give.